How many of you have been to an event where you've seen me before? How many about? Okay, so about half of you. The rest of you then clearly need to know who this strange licensing lady is. So I work for a company in the UK called Licensing School. My colleague Paul is here. And we set up that company to teach people about licensing. And that's all we do. We travel the world, we teach people about licensing. Really, truly, it's called Licensing School because we just wanted a company that had a cool name, because obviously licensing's cool. See what we did there? And whenever we do events, we always bring our tuck shop with us. So the Licensing School tuck shop is there, lots of sweets to keep your energy going through the day. So for you today, if you have small people at home you'd like to take a bag home for, that's okay. Feel free to help yourself. Probably not running up in the middle of the presentations, but at suitable intervals, help yourself. Telling you a little bit about myself, I've been doing licensing a long time. So some of you will know I ran my first licensing course in 1995. Obviously I was 7 at the time, let's be really clear about that. And in those days we ran a 2.5-day course where it was for salespeople, and I taught people all about Office on day 1, all about back office on day 2, and then we did licensing the half of the 3rd day, and I could do the whole of licensing because it was that simple. These days, of course, need a lot longer to explain about licensing, as Kieran said, and it's something I very much enjoy doing. So today, I really want you to learn something, and that's why I've called this Zero to Hero. You don't need to understand anything now. By the end of it, I would like you to understand more. Let's see who we have in the room. This is your arm that you're going to wave, okay? If you would describe yourself as an LSP, can you give me a wave? Okay, so we probably got 1/5 of you are saying LSP. If you are an indirect provider in CSP, give me a wave. Oh, lots of indirect providers, excellent. What about if you're a direct CSP partner? So you can vote twice, lots of direct CSP partners. And what about if you're operating as an indirect CSP reseller? Okay, just a couple. All of you, extraordinarily welcome. All of you today will be relevant for, which is good. My next question is, if I was to say, okay, Azure reservations, that's the topic of this session. How would you rate your knowledge? I'll explain how you're going to vote. This is, please don't ask me any questions. This is, actually, Louise, we could probably swap places because I know loads about this. Okay? We're going to vote after 3, just so I can see where you are. So Azure reservations, software subscriptions, all the new stuff, how would you rate yourself? After 3, 1, 2, 3. There's some people going, I'm not even putting my hand up, she might ask me a question. There's some brave people at the back where I don't think she can see me, I'll put my hand up quite high. Okay, not a huge number of hands waving very much above this, so that's good. This is really an important set of topics for you to know about. And one of the reasons ties exactly back to what Kieran was saying. We're seeing different, is that me? Is that my hair? We're seeing different things happening in CSP to offer our customers different things. So you asked a question about committed offers. And if we think back to how have we rewarded our customers for things in the past, we've said, well, Mr. Customer, we can give you the best price. If you sign an enterprise agreement and take your 5,000 desktops and buy Windows and Office for all of them, we'll give you a great price for that. And we've encouraged our customers to make some sort of commitment. And why do they do that? To get the best pricing, of course. But the world is changing, and committing to sort of, the volume of desktops, that was all software, that was all yesterday. But what we're starting to see in CSP, we're offering our customers different ways of committing so they can get the best pricing. And we'll see, we're going to talk about reservations in general, we're going to talk about software subscriptions, and what we're going to be able to say to our customer, Mr. Customer, you kind of want a flexible solution, you buy it this way. Mr. Customer, you think that you deserve better pricing because you're a committed customer, aha, buy it that way. So that's what this is all about, is to give you an overview of some of these new offers that are arriving. Now, I think in the UK, really, we say the word offering. To me, an offer is like a special offer, but in American English, an offer is the word that they use, so an offering. And what we're going to see is that the offers that we talk about in CSP, so like reservations, is a thing. It exists outside of CSP, actually. It's not tied to CSP, and this is exactly what Kieran was saying. When I talk about a reservation, whatever it is, then that reservation has a set of terms and conditions around it, which are the same if I buy that reservation through CSP, through WebDirect, or through an enterprise agreement. So now I don't think, oh, I'm going to have to sign an enterprise agreement because it's only available in there. Oh, I'm going to have to buy through CSP because I get the best price through there. I'm trying to abstract everything and saying, we need a catalogue of stuff. We need reservations, whatever, a catalogue of stuff. We need different ways for people to buy. They need a direct relationship with Microsoft. They need partner help, or they're pretty self-sufficient. They just want to buy through the web. So in effect, people are going to look at what they can buy, decide the best way for them to buy it, and there's no price wars, there's nothing going on. It's just, you know what, 3 ways to buy, standard set of offers. Therefore, we can get the best thing that we need as a customer for our business. So, reservations and its friends are the new thing that we need to understand. So, on here, our agenda, what I want to have a look at, I don't think we need to do an overview of CSP. We're going to be focusing on Windows Server virtual machines. You have to love virtual machines for this part of the day, which you will do. And what we're going to be looking at are customer options for Windows Server virtual machines. And we're going to become familiar with the Azure Hybrid Benefit, reserved instances, and server subscriptions. Who's heard of the Azure Hybrid Benefit? Okay, I don't want to put you on the spot, but who hasn't heard of the Azure Hybrid Benefit and is brave enough to put their hand up? Okay, that's good. I probably teach, if I'm honest, I probably teach the Azure Hybrid Benefit 3 times a week. So if you haven't heard of it, where have you been on all these training courses? But it's something that still needs to be taught, so that's absolutely fine. Reserved instances, server subscriptions, we'll see what those are. We're then, having done that for Windows Server, don't want to leave SQL Server out, so we're going to repeat for SQL Server. Luckily, because we know so much about virtual machines by that stage, you're going to see it's the same for SQL Server. This is my interesting fact of the day. How old is SQL Server today? Not today, this year, sorry, not even today. Very. 25. Oh, released in 1993. Just thought I'd share that with you. We're going to look at license mobility on there, and then, as if that wasn't exciting enough, we're going to touch on the SQL Server database service as well, and make sure that things like, oh, exactly the same things apply to that as well. So can you see what I'm trying to do here? If you understand the Azure Hybrid Benefit generally, if you understand reserved instances general and server subscriptions, it applies to lots of different solutions for customers. So understanding those, good use of time. I can see we can hardly wait to get started. Let us get started. So we're going to talk about Windows Server virtual machines to start with, and we're talking about virtual machines in Azure. And what we are looking at is a customer who is thinking to themselves, actually, I've got an on-premises server farm and I'm kind of interested in extending my server farm to Azure. It's a rare customer that wakes up and thinks, yeah, I think I need some virtual machines today. Something needs to happen. This particular customer, let's say, there's their on-premises data center. Can you see there's some virtual machines running? If you look they're down here, virtual machines running. Let's say they've run out of space on there. Now, they have licensed this server farm appropriately. They bought Windows Server licenses for that, but they've run out of space. So they think, I know, they probably don't, but you help them to think, I know, rather than perhaps buying a new physical server and having to spec that out, get approval, get it ordered, set it up, 3 weeks later I can have more capacity, I think, why don't I just have some Azure virtual machines? So here's an insight into my head. Clearly, that's what Azure is. It's a cloud up there with lots of servers on it. Obviously, is it not the same in everybody's head? Now, there's Azure, masses of services. How many different services are there in Azure? Right, this is the answer you should all be going. It's like, I don't know, loads is the right answer. There are thousands and thousands of services. Satya is famous for saying there's a new service added every 3 days to the Azure. Virtual machines form a large number of those services. Every virtual machine is a different service, but many services, virtual machines, just one of them. And as a customer, what I can do is I can buy a virtual machine. Now, I don't know how clearly you can see this, but can you see on this first virtual machine, sorry, this first physical server, I've got 3 virtual machines running, if you put your best eyes on. Those are perhaps the new virtual machines that I want. And one important thing to note is that when we're looking at on-premises licensing for virtual machines, it's the number of virtual machines I care about. When I go to Azure, it's the size of the virtual machine that I care about. And that's why I've tried to make my diagram accurate there, so that we get to learn all the licensing. And the first choice I've got, if I'm thinking, yeah, I want some virtual machines in Azure, is I can pay an all-inclusive fee for that Windows Server virtual machine. And it would help if we can all get in our heads the makeup of a Windows Server virtual machine. We need to think, when I look at a virtual machine, there are 2 components. We've got the compute component and we've got the Windows Server component. It's like if I ordered an on-premises server, I ordered the tin and I ordered the operating system, 2 components that I pay for. And when I buy this type of virtual machine in Azure, it's an all-inclusive virtual machine, which means I pay one fee for both components. So the price is advertised, but it includes compute and Windows Server. And no great surprise, my virtual machines being different sizes are the different capacities, so more cores, more resource allocated to it. No surprise, the more powerful the virtual machine, the more expensive it is. But here, what we have is virtual machines, typically advertised as an hourly or monthly rate, actually billed on a per minute basis, ideal for customers who are saying, do you know what, I just want to try a virtual machine in Azure. While it's running, I get charged. While it's not, I don't. Need to sort your associated storage out as well, but that's the general premise that, great, all-inclusive, splendid. Okay, so far so good. Yeah, good. Then the customer says, hang on a minute, I don't think I was clear. Actually, I'm moving existing workloads. So actually what I meant was I had those 3 physical servers. I wanted to take those 3 virtual machines from one of the servers, it's end of life, want to take those virtual machines and run those in Azure. Not that happy with what you've just said. If we go back here, the customer is saying, I'm going to retire this last machine. What were these? These are Windows Server licenses. Would you say Windows Server licenses are quite a cheap purchase? Not so much so. So as a customer, I'm thinking, okay, hang on, I've got an on-premises workload, all happily licensed, thanks very much. I want to take it to the cloud. What do I do with my licenses? Just throw them away? Not happy with that at all. I don't like the thought that I've got to buy an all-inclusive virtual machine. I've got the Windows Server bit, can't I use that? And some of you will know the answer to this customer, because the answer here is to buy a different type of virtual machine in Azure. And can you see, I've changed the title to non-Windows Server. When you buy this type of virtual machine, those of you who know this, does it say non-Windows Server when you buy the type of virtual machine? It doesn't. What does it say? Linux. We actually buy a Linux virtual machine. You have to choose a Linux virtual machine that's enabled with a free distribution, but you buy a Linux virtual machine. And watch the dollar sign. The price is cheaper because, of course, for a non-Windows Server virtual machine, all you're paying for is compute. So what we're saying to the customer is, good news actually, just pay for the infrastructure in Azure and then bring your own licenses. Now, what extra magical thing do you need to have purchased with your licenses to make this dream come true? Software assurance, of course, which gives you a set of benefits. And what's the most important one here? It's the Azure hybrid benefit. So here, if you have, now I'm making it sound very lovely. Oh, Mr. Customer, you can take your licenses to the cloud. If you were a committed customer, you can take your licenses to the cloud. If you have active software assurance, you can take your licenses to the cloud. Now let's take a reality check here. Let's say the customer bought the licenses through Open Value, and let's say they want to buy the Azure through CSP. That going to be a good mix? Clearly the answer is yes or no. I'll give you that much of a clue. That's okay. And actually, any combination is okay. So those of you who are CSP partners and who frankly never thought you'd have to learn this much about licensing, you never sold open, never really wanted to sell open, you're not an LSP, all you're doing is checking whether your customer has active software assurance. You need to pay for your software assurance every year. If it's active, you get the chance to choose where you use your licenses, on premises or in the cloud. But the programs don't have to match. If you go to a customer, they've got an enterprise agreement, you don't have to sell the Azure through that EA. You can sell the Azure, that non-Windows Server virtual machine, through CSP, and then they just bring their own licenses, which I'll show you. Now, this is what we're talking about here, the Azure hybrid benefit. So the Azure hybrid benefit, in a nutshell, you need software assurance on your Windows licenses. That's the requirement. And then it allows you a choice, or two choices. Do you want to use your licenses on-prem, or do you want to use them in the cloud? Which cloud? In the Azure cloud? Well, we're at Microsoft, so I think nodding there would be an okay thing to do. Yep, definitely. The AWS cloud? We're at Microsoft, nodding is not a good thing to do when we say AWS, so no. Any service provider's cloud? No. And have confidence, it's called the Azure hybrid benefit because it's only the Azure cloud. So on-prem in your own data center, Mr. Customer, or go to our cloud, the Azure cloud, take your licenses there. But you can't take them to, as I say, AWS, or indeed any other cloud that you could possibly imagine. Now, you do need to be good at the Azure hybrid benefit. So I haven't taught this today, so that's good. I'll teach this today. I've got my on-premises licenses there. Who would consider themselves an expert on on-premises Windows Server licensing? One, I definitely know. Two, I definitely know. You don't have to be for this. You'll be glad to know. All I need you to do, remember a few key things. Those of you who are experts, how many licenses are there in each group there? 8, indeed. How do they know that? Well, they're very clever, magical people. This is a rule for Windows Server on-premises license. For every processor, I need 8 core licenses as a minimum. So I've just made things simple so we can count quickly. There's 8 licenses in each of these bundles. That's kind of a nice to do thing on premises, put them in these bundles. It's a must thing to do in the cloud. And you should imagine that when you look at your customers' licenses, they are neatly stacked in 8s with a pretty ribbon around them that cannot be untied. You're thinking, okay, she really is quite odd, this licensing lady. Let me explain why. We have to know how many licenses to advise our customers to take, and it's all about the size of the virtual machine. I've just taken some examples here. So D2v3 has got 2 cores, a D8v3 has got 8 cores. And if I said to you, oh, how many of these groups of 8 licenses do you think you would need for the F8 V2 virtual machine? You'd think, okay, this is quite easy. I need to take one of those groups of 8. Lovely. If I said, what about the F16 V2? You think, yeah, I've got it now. I would take 2 groups of 8 licenses. But the thing to remember is for all the smaller virtual machines, so with 1 or 2 or 4 cores, you still need to take 8 licenses. So never look at a list of virtual machines and think, oh, they've got a 1 core, a 2 core, and a 4 core, that equals 7. Brilliant, one group of 8 will do for those. You've got to have a minimum of one of those group of 8 licenses per virtual machine. If it's got 16 cores or 32 cores, you need more groups of 8 licenses. Let us practice this. Are you ready? So here we have a customer, and oh my goodness, there's another thing we need to know about. Windows Server licenses come in 2 flavors, Standard and Data Center. Which is the most expensive, if you had to guess? Data Center. Which has the most features? Data Center. Which is going to be the most flexible here? Data Center. Oh, licensing that's guessable. First time for everything. Have a look at this. Let's take this customer. They've got their virtual machines, 3 virtual machines running. They are correctly licensed because we've got the 8 groups of licenses for each of the processors there. And what we want to do is to use those licenses in the cloud. So this customer's very law-abiding. They turn off the virtual machines on premises. There's Azure. They kind of mentally assign those licenses to Azure. And then this is the number of virtual machines they want to run. It's actually the same virtual machines, but we didn't care about the size down here. We just cared about the number of them. Up there, I do care about the size. The customer had 4 groups of 8 licenses. Are they compliant here? If you were recommending this customer, they said, this is what we want to run, this is what we've got. Are you happy with that? You should be. So count with me from the 16, the 8 and the 2. I'm counting groups of 8. I would go 1, 2, 3, 4. I need 4 groups of 8 licenses for those 3 virtual machines. And I think this is the way we expect this to work, that, I've got software assurance, choice of where I use my licenses. And indeed, this is called alternative rights. Just to keep me in a job, to make life a little bit more exciting. Data Center, different. Data Center works like this. Same example, but here the rights are additive. That means, slightly confusingly, that I can keep the licenses here following the on-premises rules, and then what I do is I can use the groups of 8 rules to also license workloads in the cloud. So here, I would like you to count there. Are you happy with that customer? Look at what they've got on premises. They've got 8 groups of 8 licenses. That's what they've told you they want to run. Are you happy with that? Some brave nods. If you're bravely nodding, you're correct. Counting, I'll go clockwise. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, Mr. Customer, actually you could run another virtual machine with 8 or less cores if you wanted. Good. So what we've learnt here is that a lot of customers are going to go from the cloud, go from on-premises to the cloud. Which way do they want to go? That sort of proof of concept testing arena where I've got the all-inclusive billing, or am I moving workloads? I've got licenses, I'm not very happy, I've got to buy those again. Oh, that's okay, take them with you. We need software assurance, that gives us the Azure hybrid benefit. But these customers are frankly never happy, because now the customer says, excuse me, just saying, we've got full-time workloads in the cloud, and we'd consider ourselves a committed customer. You can't get much more committed than full-time workloads, Mr. Partner who's selling me this stuff. But just saying, we're paying the same rates for our base compute as somebody who's just trying it out. That doesn't seem very fair. And this is where we start coming to the committed offers, because this is where we start saying, Mr. Customer, so you're saying you're committed. Does that mean that you're prepared to run your stuff full time? Well, yes, it does. In that case, then I've got something interesting to tell you. What would we sell this customer, those of you who know? It sounds quite good. If you were saying reservation, give yourself a tick. If you were saying reserved instance, give yourself perhaps a slightly bigger tick. But what we need to start looking at now is a family. Who doesn't love a family? There is a reservations family, and we need to understand the key tenets of reservation. And a reservation is for a committed customer, first thing. Then a reservation is about paying up front for a particular service. Why is the customer going to pay up front? They want a better price. So we need to think, a reservation is all about an Azure service that the customer pays up front for and they get the better price. So here, this customer's saying, well, I want a better price. And we're saying, right, I can give you a better price. And it's not just about running full-time workloads. I'm going to need you to pay up front, and then I can give you significant savings. So the reservation, you can't go wrong using the word reservation. That's a good word to use. But actually, every member of the family has its own name, just to make life a bit more interesting. And what we're looking at here are Azure virtual machine reserved instances. And it's all about saying, OK, I want to pay up front and get a good price. We know that's about a reservation. What am I paying up front to get my good price for? It's the base compute part of a virtual machine. Think back to a virtual machine that's got two components. I'm bringing my own licenses for the Windows Server bit. I know I'm getting the best price for that. Software assurance is a great price. But hang on, I'm paying pay-as-you-go prices for the compute. And now what we're adding into the mix is, I can give you a good price for the base compute. So we need to think here, reserved instances, what are they? A way of purchasing Azure-based compute, that infrastructure part of the virtual machine, with a great price and flexibility, up front, and in return for that, you get the pricing, and you need to make some choices at the time of purchase. Let's have a look at those choices. You've got to choose the term. You can pay up front for 1 or 3 years. All reservations offer 1 or 3 years. Those of you who know, is there annualized payment options for the 3-year reservation? Annualized means, can I pay a third every year? There are not. So it really is up front, 1 year or 3 years. Not to say they won't in the future, but at the moment, up front means up front. Then I've got to choose the type of virtual machine in a data center. And that's all about, how do Microsoft offer these amazing prices? Well, they're getting an idea of capacity and they're building to that. So Mr. Customer, you commit to a D4 V3 in the US East data center. Great, I know where I've got to put capacity. I can give you a good price. And then the last thing is the assignment level. And I've put here company or department because that kind of works across agreements. Who's familiar with Azure subscriptions in CSP? OK, probably a third of you. Who's familiar with me saying it in that way, Azure subscriptions? OK, people going, yes, we've heard you say that. So let us just take a slight detour. As I'm a CSP partner, my customer wants some Azure, I have to set up a subscription. And the reason I say it like that is because we need to think of it, it's got a capital S, a subscription. And the subscription is a container to which you assign Azure services. So if I'm the techie guy and I spin up a virtual machine, however I buy my Azure, I've got to allocate it to a subscription. EA, WebDirect, CSP, always allocated to a subscription. Now I have multiple subscriptions. Perhaps if I want to get a view by department, I could have a subscription by department, a subscription by project. I could just have one subscription if I don't care about all of that. But here, the assignment level is either, let's say I have 4 subscriptions, when I buy this reserved instance, do I want it allocated to one subscription, or do I want it available through all 4 of the subscriptions? So here we could say the assignment level is single subscription or shared subscriptions on there, but I make that choice. You can see that the word flexibility is in the description. You can change these things afterwards. So let's do a recap here. There's our Windows Server virtual machine, 2 components. Option 1, all-inclusive Windows Server meter. Proof of concept, pay-as-you-go, lovely. Option 2 was when, well, I carry on paying for the base compute with a meter, but I'm going to bring my own licenses for Windows Server because I've got software assurance, I'm eligible for the Azure hybrid benefit. And here, what we've talked about now is we're saying, the next option is you're going to buy a reserved instance to pay for base compute. You still need to bring your own licenses, and that gives us a good, solid option in terms of cost. Do you think I'm bad at PowerPoint, or is there room for a 4th option on here? Don't answer that. I don't create these slides. Of course, there's a 4th option. This is sort of for intellectually for you at the moment. What is the 4th option here? Clearly, it's going to be, well, this is going to be when I buy a reserved instance for that, but I haven't got software assurance. So there is another meter that allows you to do that. So you are going to have customers, you say, hopefully, have you got software assurance on your Windows licenses? They say, no, I'm a normal customer, of course I haven't. Go, oh, okay. That 4th option is absolutely still worth recommending to the customer. They will save a fortune by prepaying for the compute, and we'll see how we can save them some money on the Windows Server as well. But that is a valid option. I'm happy to commit to base compute. I want the best price, but here I haven't got my own licenses, so I'm not going to be able to bring those with me. Give me a way of charging for that. Let's have a look at the amount of money a customer might save. Now, this is from the standard website. There's a figure there. What is that gold cylinder? Some of you will have heard me say this before. Clearly, it's a pile of gold coins, is it not? Like old pound coins, or guineas maybe. And what this is saying is, Mr. Customer, if you're running a full-time virtual machine and you're going to use that meter, you're going to need to find a pile of gold coins this high. If, on the other hand, you were going to be able to bring your own licenses and you were prepared to prepay for base compute, you only need a pile of gold coins this high. In the middle, and this is why I'm saying this is still worth recommending, this was that 4th option. Mr. Customer hasn't got any Windows Server licenses, still worth prepaying for base compute. The pile of gold coins is an attractive size on there. I've got, you'll get these slides. I'm not going to, just in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through all of the, well, actually, no, I will go through these, in fact. So this is the Azure pricing calculator. Who uses the Azure pricing calculator? Who doesn't use the Azure pricing calculator? Some people go, I don't, tell me off if you want to. It's a great tool. I think it gets better and better over time. There are still a few odd things, but if you have never used it because you didn't know about it, it's definitely worth evaluating. So most people are using it. Have a look here. I need you to have this diagram in your head. I'll just go back to it. You can take a picture if you want to, but I need you to have this diagram in your head as the different options and the story we built up, what I had, what I didn't have. I'm going to go through the Azure pricing calculator to show you how you can quote for these 4 different options, okay? So we'll do it in the right order. So this is the all-inclusive Windows Server virtual machine. I've chosen the same virtual machine in the same region. I want to give you some comparison on price. So we can see here it's quoting us $817.60 a month for this random virtual machine I've chosen. The next one, I'm going for the base meter, but I'm bringing my own licenses. Now, I'm going to say naughty thing, naughty because it's not clear. When you use the calculator, you use this button here to say, ta-da, I'm eligible for the Azure Hybrid benefit. In other words, I'm bringing my own licenses with me. So the calculator says, splendid, I don't need to worry about a price for Windows Server then. But actually, as when you're quoting the customer, you do really, because that ends up being just the base compute price. So here, I've just taken some retail pricing for software assurance, or estimated retail pricing, $9.20, and then I've added on the two together to give me a total on there. So just be aware of that. When you choose that Azure Hybrid benefit, the calculator says, phew, I don't need to worry about the cost of Windows Server then, which of course is not accurate. So the argument here is that customers who have already made this investment are perhaps so relieved they can reuse it that they don't take any account of that. I don't think it's it's not a proper comparison without realising they have paid something for that. So that was option 2. Option 3, now we're getting into reserved instance and we've got our own licenses. So look what I've done here. I have kept that blue option on. I have my own licenses. But can you see here, billing option, I've got pay-as-you-go, I've got 1 year reserved and 3 year reserved. Obviously, because I'm trying to prove a point here, I've taken the 3 year reservation because I want to make the price look really good. I'll be honest, that's what I've done. And then the last one, this is where, I want to pay for base compute. Hashtag crushed, I've got no Windows Server licenses with SA. I need to use the meter. So here I can't turn Azure Hybrid benefit on. I've chosen a 3 year reservation and you can see the price. And if I put all of those back on there, then you can see the options. So option 1, the most expensive, but fabulously flexible. So I don't want to have to commit to anything. I want to do a proof of concept. I want to run a virtual machine for 18 hours, 3 months, whatever it is. I don't have to commit. We will go to find with this that really option 1 and option 3, to make things simple, are the ones you should recommend to customers. So option 1, flexible, most expensive. Option 3, Mr. Customer, you have got something that's running pretty much full time. I can give you the best possible pricing there, as you see. I do realise when I get going, it's like you can't really ask a question. So you are allowed to ask questions. Equally, if you've got something a bit odd as a question, we have our topic table. So I'll be sitting outside on my licensing table. Come and visit if you would like to. But just to say you can ask questions, really. Okay, we need to understand how reserved instances work. How do reserved instances work? Is it a very manual process or is it a very magic process? What are you secretly wishing for here? Magic, and unicorns were involved, so this is very, very nice. We need to understand what happens here because you need to feel very comfortable that you can say to your customer, yeah, seriously, you buy the reservation and then everything is taken care of, and that's important. So how do they work? Let's take this customer, Woodgrove Bank. They've got 3 full-time workloads running in the West US data center, and they want to save money by acquiring reserved instances. No customer ever said this, of course, but let's see what the key points are here. We've talked to them. We found they've got full-time workloads running. When you hear full-time workloads, lots of customers have full-time workloads. Customers don't necessarily turn the virtual machines off at night or just run them for 3 months. When they've worked out what they want, sure, they're running them full-time. So Woodgrove Bank have got full-time workloads. That's a trigger for us to think, haha, exciting, I can save you money by helping you with reserved instances. Now, of the 2 parts of a Windows Server virtual machine, where will reserved instance play? Where will it save the money, at base compute or Windows Server? People pointing at the bottom here, indeed, just checking that. Let's see what they've got. Now, I've given them the same type of virtual machines. It doesn't have to be the same type of virtual machine, it just makes my example a bit simpler. But can you see the top 2 are running Windows Server, the bottom one's just running Linux, and I'm going to assume that's a free distribution down there. We'll come to SUSE in a minute. So I say to them, okay, what are you currently doing for that? And they say, well, for this virtual machine, actually, we are paying for the base compute on a meter basis, and then we've got our own licenses, so we're bringing those for the Windows Server bit. What about the next one, I say? They say, well, we ran out of licenses, so we're having to use the all-inclusive Windows Server virtual machine, which is a meter. And then what about the bottom? They say, oh, well, that's just the base virtual machine. And of course, there's no, in this example, for maybe it's Ubuntu, they don't pay any price for the operating system. Now, I'm not suggesting necessarily you draw this out for your customers, but conceptually, what we need to think, wherever you see a meter, that means expensive. When things are on a meter, it's great, they're really flexible. Turn them off, turn them on, just get charged for while they're running. But we know these are full-time workloads. I need to save some money. So I'm looking to save money where there are meters on there. So what do? Well, this is how it's going to look in the new world. And what I do is I think, right, okay, I'm going to save them some money with reservations. So I need to have a conversation, perhaps, first of all, are you happy to pay up front? They are, of course. I have a conversation about always a 1 year or a 3 year option, they choose. And then the other things, well, I know the type, it's an E2v3, and I know the data center, so we're pretty good to go, actually. And what I sell them are 3 reserved instances. Call them reservations, either is fine. I sell them, here is my inventory, 3 E2v3s in the West US data center. And this little symbol here means I have paid in advance. So what happens, the reserved instances sit in the inventory, but they're always alert. And they're happiest when they're used. So what a reserved instance does is it sits there and it tries to make a match. What are the 2 things it has to make a match on? That was my questioning voice. You're allowed to shout at me now.
Size and location.
Size and location, A-class student, indeed, although I know you've heard this a few times before. So the size, the E2v3, the West US data center, there's a match. So what happens? Immediately, that reserved instance is used to stop the compute charges for that first virtual machine. It then knows, I'll show you how it knows, that the Azure Hybrid benefit is being used for the Windows Server, so there's no charge for that virtual machine. Because I've said, I've prepaid for base compute, I'm bringing my own licenses, that virtual machine carries on running exactly the same, it's just the charging changes by the power of magic, no intervention required. The next one, found a match again, and then it says, bit of a conundrum here, I've got to charge you for Windows Server, what's it going to do here? What's the billing engine going to do? I think you said the right thing. It's going to start charging Windows Server on a meter. That's the only thing it can do. It's like, well, it's a Windows Server virtual machine, I can see that. I've got to charge you somehow. It invokes the meter. So where I was paying the all-inclusive charge, I now don't pay for that bit, I'm just paying for that bit. Sure, I bought these, but we saw the sorts of savings you could get there. And then the last one, well, that's it. There's no other charges for that. It's just the base compute. So as long as it's a free distribution, then just base compute on there. Okay, fine. Question to you. How long are reservations? 1 or 3 years. You're going to get a notification, I say you, the end customer and the partner, will get a notification as you come to the end of the reservation. No auto-renew at the moment. From a technical point of view, everybody goes, la, 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 didn't see that email come in. 12 months comes up, they only bought 1 year reservations. What happens? Does the virtual server farm self-destruct and everybody has to go home from work? What happens? Do the virtual machines carry on running? Absolutely. There's magic involved here. Don't never forget that. So virtual machines carry on running, la, la, la. What happens from a charging perspective? It just rolls back to the other side. So I haven't got the reservations anymore. It just goes back to the way it was. So if you do miss that notification and you scramble around to get a reservation, there could be some odd charges for 3 days while you're all scrambling around, but there's no loss of service. The billing is completely separate from the technical side. Let's have a look at how you provision a Windows Server virtual machine. Anyone do this for real? Anyone a real live Windows Server provisioner? New job title for you. It'd be quite good on a business card. I'm a Windows Server provisioner. So this is just a screenshot of, I'm in the management portal and I have gone to the gallery. I've chosen a Windows Server virtual machine. A couple of things to point out here. One is this is where you choose your subscription. So there's my subscription. And then down here, remember, I'm provisioning a Windows Server virtual machine. I've chosen it from the gallery, so the system knows, oh, Mr. Customer, you're going to need to pay for base compute and Windows Server. I look forward to you telling me how you're going to do that. Down the bottom here, you can say yes to that option and say that you already have a Windows license. Is there any checking in the system? Does the system say, oh, let me just have a look at this customer, see what Windows Server license, where you've used them, how it's all going? There isn't. Now, at this point, people go, well, that's ridiculous. I can't be working with a system like that. What checking is there on premises when someone spins up another virtual machine? There's no checking, and it's all about the customer making sure they're compliant, probably with the help of a partner because it becomes a huge job. But it is about when Mr. Audit walks in through the door, he's going to look at that virtual machine up there and say, oh, there's a Windows Server virtual machine. How are you paying for the Windows Server part of it? And you're going to need to say, oh, that virtual machine, yes, here's the license that we have mentally assigned to that. It's not to say it won't always be like that. We could see sort of better compliance functionality in the future, but at the moment, on-prem and cloud, pretty similar, actually. Then, this is what happens. So if you say yes there, whether or not the system can find a matching reservation, it will use the Azure Hybrid benefit. It's not going to charge you for Windows Server. If you say no there, then if it can't find a reservation that matches, what it's saying is, well, you've told me you haven't got Windows Server, I can't find a reservation, this virtual machine I'm going to have to charge at the all-inclusive rate. And the last one, if you say no, and it can find a matching reserved instance, then it's saying, right, understand you've prepaid for base compute, I'm going to have to charge you for Windows Server on the meter. But again, all done automatically on there. Okay, let us have a look at this customer who says, I understand the cost benefits I get for paying for reserved instances up front, but I'm a bit worried if my business needs change. What could change for this customer? I hate E2 v3s. That was brilliant at the start of my project, but now I need something completely different. So I might want to change the type of virtual machine. It could be that, in fact, I need to change the data center. It could be my needs change in all manner of ways. You have 3 things to tell a customer. This is the flexibility you get. You can reassign. Reassign is just changing the subscriptions. You know, we said it could go to a single subscription or all of them. If it's a single subscription, you can go to a different one. If it was one, you could go to them all and vice versa. Do that on the fly. It happens instantaneously. Or you can exchange. And exchange is when you say, oh, I did have a virtual machine in this family. Now I really, you can see I'm a bit of a whingy customer. Now I really want a virtual machine in that family. You have to do an exchange. And the way it works is it's calculated. Now, can you see here it says customers can do this, customers can do that. Through CSP, this is clearly, you'll be glad to know, not the customers doing this typically. This is the partner doing it, but it's probably driven by a customer desire. So a customer wants to exchange a reserved instance. And what happens is let's make it simple. I bought a 1-year reservation, 6 months in, I changed my mind. There is an imaginary refund that goes back to the partner. So you can charge what you like for this, but you're getting the refund. You don't really get it, it's imaginary money. What needs to happen is you say, well, that's what I did have, that's what the customer now wants, and you buy a completely new reservation, which is 1 or 3 years. And then the price is calculated, imaginary rebate applied to that, and then you get charged for the difference. But there's no pro-ratering of this. So I had a 1 year, 6 months in I wanted to exchange. It's not a 6-month thing. You have to, that's just an amount of money, and then you exchange it for 1 or a 3-year one. And the rule is the new thing has got to be more expensive than the old thing. And then worst case at the end there, you can cancel a reserved instance at any time. There's a cancellation fee, 12%. I need a gazelle over there. 12% and $50,000 per customer per year. Hello, how are you?
Hi. With CSP, yes. Because I'm struggling to get my head around, so Azure is billed monthly in arrears. If they're going to do a reserved instance for a year or 3 years, how does that work then? Because obviously if they can cancel it at any point, where I don't understand how that would be billed.
So from a partner perspective, if it's the all-inclusive thing, you get the bill per month. Oh, I've used it for this many hours, that many hours, and that's on your big Azure usage-based services invoice. For reservations, completely separate invoice for one-time fees. And then what will happen, so let's say I paid £500 for that reserved instance. They want to cancel it halfway through. When they cancel it, you get the refund off your next one-time invoice bill. And then you negotiate with them. You say, well, actually, the most we can give you back is £100. You make up the rules. You're going to get back. So if I cancel halfway through, they'll work out how much credit should be, take the 12% off and give you that back to you as the partner. That comes on a credit on your next reservations bill.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Kind of. Yeah, no, it doesn't.
I'll see you at lunchtime, young lady. Gazelle, if you could adopt some gazelle-like qualities. We call them gazelles because sometimes they're not very gazelle-like. This is quite a good gazelle. I've had many gazelles.
For the exchange, are you allowed to change license programs from EA to CSP or vice versa? Would you have to cancel and rebuy?
You cannot transfer reservations between customers, between partners, between programs. So, no. Gazelle, you can return for the microphone. This gazelle probably has a real name, but let's not find it out. It's much, oh. Oh, well. Now, let's just go back here and talk about the choices that we make. Can you see the grey ones? In the beginning with reserved instances, if I bought a D4 V3 in the US East data center, then if I wanted anything else, I had to do an exchange. But a new feature was launched only probably 6 weeks ago called instance flexibility. Who's heard of instance flexibility? Just my A student. Do you want to sit at the front, actually? That would, yeah, I think you deserve it, frankly. If only I bought prizes. So instance flexibility is this. It's good. So here we have, let's say my customer purchased a standard D16 V3 virtual machine. In the old days, months ago, that would have been very much tied to that type of virtual machine. These days, though, what happens is you actually, so this is what I've bought, I actually buy units within a family. So how many units have I bought here? I've bought 8 units. So if I spin up a D16 V3, that's 8 units. I bought 8 units. Happy days, I've prepaid for the base compute. Brilliant. My needs change, however. And perhaps I spin up a D8 V3, or 2 of those. Would you agree that's covered by what I've already purchased? Well, you can see that's 2 lots of 4 units, clearly 8. That's fine. How does that apply itself? By the power of magic. So you don't have to do anything. This is great for the customer within the same family. And then you can see the other one I've taken here. What have I taken? An 8, a 4 and a 4. So yes, clearly that's supposed to be covered by the RI. What's going to happen if I spin this up? Does the unicorn die? Well, that's a sad thought. If I spin up a D64 V3, which clearly I haven't got enough points for, what happens? What about the D32? Well, it's magic. Let us never forget that. And if I do, what have I chosen? A 32. Half of the compute costs are covered by the RI. The other half are just done on a meter. So you're never going to lose out. It would be better, of course, if that's what I'm going to go for. Well, I buy another reserved instance to cover the rest of the compute, but I don't have to worry about that in the short term because it's all taken care of. Okay, ready? I'm sorry these customers are so whingy. It's another one, they're never happy. This customer says, well, excuse me, I've listened to all of that, sounds fab, but it's not fair. You say, right, why isn't it fair? Well, I haven't got Windows Server licenses with software assurance. My partner was rubbish. They didn't sell me software assurance 10 years ago. It's not fair. So what do we say to this partner? Sorry, this customer. Buy some. This is quite a hard line, accurate, but quite hard. They go, well, that's ridiculous. I don't want to have to. I haven't got any licensing programs. I've taken everything to CSP. Don't make me buy some. We need something else to help this customer. Drum roll, we're now going for the something else. Let's revise. We're talking here about a customer who's got a longer term or a predictable workload. They want the best possible pricing. We know for base compute reserved instance, we know for Windows Server, best price, bring your own licenses, but they haven't got any. Something else then. So reserved instances, what do we say generally about them? You pay up front, always 1 year or 3 years. Why? Best possible price. Lovely. Now, the Azure Hybrid benefit is a benefit that allows your customer to assign their Windows Server licenses to Azure virtual machines if they want to. And we saw that one way of getting that is Windows Server licenses with Active SA. What is the other way of getting the Azure Hybrid benefit? I think I could hear those. This is subscriptions is the right answer. A new thing is launched. This is not very old. There are now server subscriptions for Windows Server, and they also give the Azure Hybrid benefit. What do you notice about the terms of a server subscription? Uncannily like the reserved instance, which of course makes them best friends forever. So the reserved instance, the server subscription, they're both about paying up front to get the best possible price, available for 1 year or 3 years paid up front. Do you have to buy them at exactly the same time? No. Will your head slightly explode if you don't? Possibly. So I would say to a customer, right, let's get you the best price. Let's buy them at the same time because they run for exactly 1 year and 3 years. It's not to the nearest end of the month. So to make things nice and lining up, that's the way to do it. The Azure Hybrid benefit, why is it called the Hybrid benefit? I'll do an action. Clearly that's hybrid. On-prem, cloud. I buy a server subscription, it includes the Azure Hybrid benefit. I can use my licenses up there. Where can I also use them? Now, I'm not particularly saying to you here, oh, great option for licensing your customers' on-premises workloads, but you can. You're allowed to. There's nothing bad about that. You absolutely can. The main reason for launching these is for the sad customer who doesn't have Windows Server licenses with SA, but absolutely use them on premises for a customer, especially as a customer who says, well, today I'm on-prem, tomorrow I might want to go to the cloud. Brilliant. Exactly what you should do on there. So the last, I've just added on the very bottom under the Azure Hybrid benefit, there are 2 ways of getting the Azure Hybrid benefit. If your customer has Windows Server licenses with SA, splendid. Otherwise, these new server subscriptions. Should we find out more about server subscriptions? Definitely. So there were actually actively some active nods then, or was that kind of a sleeping nod? I think I'll never know. Let's find out. So, an overview. 1 or 3 years upfront payment. We're all feeling a little bit smug now because we know that. Fabulous. Now, for Windows Server, it's just Windows Server standard licenses. Did you hear me underline that? Standard licenses. Do you remember when we were looking at the Azure hybrid benefit with the traditional licenses, we were saying standard is either or? That's kind of simpler. So it's standard licenses only for these server subscriptions. Why are they sold in 8 packs? Because you've got to keep them together in groups of 8. So to encourage all of us to be compliant, the ribbon is tied for us at the point of purchase, let's say. A minimum of 8 core licenses must be assigned to an Azure virtual machine. You can have further packs of 8 core licenses as required. The rules are the same. You can't split a pack. If it's a 2-core virtual machine, tough, you still need an 8-core pack. This, I think you'll find too easy probably, but how many server subscription packs of 8 core licenses? You're going to say a number and I'm going to click. Or not. Did you mean 1 there? Yes, 1 pack. Can you see? I've got to buy a whole pack. There's no half pack, quarter pack. How many packs for a 2-core virtual machine? 1. 4-core virtual machine? 1. 8-core virtual machine? 16-core? Okay. I thought that might be too easy. It was, I think. Let's have a look at pricing. Now, those of you who are direct partners will see a price list in Partner Centre. That was not the slide I wanted, actually. I wanted a more strategic one. But in terms of the way the pricing was designed, it was designed to be similar to the prices you pay in the Open Value subscription programme. So that's kind of the pricing. And there is, I don't think anybody will be surprised by this. It's more expensive to buy 1-year subscriptions than it is to buy 3-year subscriptions. Of course, I save more money buying a 3-year subscription. And in terms of the pricing, US dollar prices, a 1-year subscription, I'm paying $291 for the whole year. 3-year subscription, you can see the price there. Now, I realise that you won't like this slide. Well, I'm going to show it to you anyway, and I'm going to make you love it, okay? This is to prove a point, really, truly. What I'd like you to do, first of all, get used to how I've created this. I'm going over here with my light, you lot watch, okay? There's, you know, the 4 options. There's the all-inclusive virtual machine. There's the pay-as-you-go compute, bring your own licenses. There's reserved instance and bring your own licenses. There's reserved instance, oh, I didn't have my own licenses, the core meter. And then for these 2, I've said, well, actually, bring your own licenses could either be a Windows Server subscription or I've got software assurance. So it's the 4 things. All I would like you to focus on for the moment, top row, that's the all-inclusive Windows Server virtual machine. I can see a monthly price, $817. Let's take the best one here. We haven't got software assurance, we're a normal customer. I'm going to pay reserved instance and server subscription, so a monthly cost, $212. Much cheaper. Can you pay for the reserved instance and the server subscriptions on a monthly fee? No, they're all about upfront payment. Now, I say, can you pay? As a partner, I could buy these and say to my customer, yeah, okay, you can pay me monthly. I can make that deal. I probably charge them $300 or something a bit more because I've got to bear the risk, but sure, I can offer what I like. However, what I'd like you to do is to have a look at the 3-year column. Can you see, if we ran our virtual machine full time and we were paying pay-as-you-go nearly $30,000, if I bought the 3-year reservations and subscriptions, $7,600, clearly a benefit, clearly a lot less. However, look at the last column. That's what I really want you to focus on. That's saying I only actually, because I'm saying, is it a full-time workload? And some of you will be thinking, yeah, but what's full-time? Is it 90%? Is it 80%? Is it pretty much full-time at 72%? Be more precise. So I thought, okay, let's imagine that this customer says, yeah, actually, it kind of is on and off. It kind of runs in a year. It would run 3 months of that year. I've then done the pricing. And can you see, if you paid as you go, or do you pay as you went? There's an English conundrum. If you use the pay-as-you-go mechanism, then it would cost you about $7,500 because I only have to pay when it's being used. If I pay completely up front, which I have to do, so these prices are exactly the same, goodness me, have a look. That's almost the same price. And what you should think with Windows Server virtual machines, you are going to have the conversation with your customer, well, how much of its life does it spend running? Because you've got to recommend the right way to buy. If they give you an answer that's a quarter of full time, it's worth doing a quote with reserved instances and server subscriptions. Because you can see here a quarter of the time, that is only ever so slightly more expensive on there. Now, the customer will say, yeah, but I've got to pay up front for that. I don't want to. Fine, that could be a big enough reason. But in terms of giving the best possible price, it's only a quarter of the time before looking at server subscriptions and reserved instances will be worthwhile. Okay, let's have a look at what else I want to do here. I think probably we're good with Windows Server. I think probably we should have a look at SQL Server. And this is where you start thinking, oh my goodness, we've done quite a lot on Windows Server, my brain's getting full. This is a very good gazelle, not even having to alert the gazelle. Morning.
Morning. I'm going to go asking this question. So this is all for public cloud so far. What if we happen to have our own on-prem Azure stack? So the server licenses, they can't bring them onto that stack, as I understand.
So, right, you don't need the Azure hybrid benefit with the Azure stack because it's all your own owned thing.
Yeah.
So you could buy these server subscriptions and use them with an Azure stack because you choose where you use them. So let me know if I haven't understood the question. We can talk at lunch, but...
Sure. But so if customers have got all their own licensing, and we say, yeah, come to us, come to our particular cloud, and they turn around and go, yeah, great, we'll bring our licenses across, as you've clearly identified earlier.
Is it your Azure stack or theirs?
Our Azure stack, on our own on-prem, so we're a bit unique.
No, in that case, it's my own stuff or the public Azure cloud. You are right.
Yeah, so in that instance, then they have to pay their licenses twice. So what
I'm
they
sure
would
we
have
can
purchased
come up with a more
on-prem.
positive spin than that, but maybe, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So, SQL Server. The good news is this is all exactly the same, so that's very nice. So let's have a look. What options have you got for using SQL Server in Azure? Well, first of all, we've got two broad categories. I'm a customer, I think, yeah, SQL's a good thing to run my app. I want to run it in a virtual machine. I can have an on-prem virtual machine, I can take it to the cloud, and this is typically an infrastructure as a service solution, IaaS. And my diagrams aren't that beautiful, but can you see that's supposed to represent a database running in that rounded rectangle in a virtual machine to remind us that in an IaaS solution, I'm managing that virtual machine, patching it, keeping it up to date, etc. What's the other option for SQL in Azure? Database as a service, indeed. And again, can you see on my diagram, I've taken the virtual machines away to indicate here that I'm just going to be consuming the database as a service. So over on that side, I've got an Azure virtual machine. On this side, I've got the SQL Server database service. And in both cases, what we want to look at is how you can get the best possible pricing. So let's take a look at the virtual machines, and we see we have some options. Option 1, all-inclusive SQL Server virtual machine meter. So one fee for the 3 components, SQL on top of Windows and the base compute. What would you say about that option? Who's it aimed at? Proof of concept, short term, flexible but expensive, Mr. Customer. There's the little meter symbol there. We've then got the option, perhaps, that I buy an all-inclusive Windows Server virtual machine and I run that on the meter, and then I bring my own SQL Server licenses for the SQL Server part. Right? What actually is going to be the best way of licensing a SQL Server virtual machine? I heard reserved instance from row 2 over there. Split it out, and as we get to, you start seeing that the best way is often to, as I say, abstract the different levels. So here we'd say, oh, well, actually pay for a reserved instance for base compute, bring your own Windows Server licenses, and bring your own SQL Server licenses. So when I bring my own...
Sorry, does license mobility cover that?
I was trying to skirt around license mobility.
Okay, I'll shut up.
I'll be honest. Those of you who are not happy about this skirting around, come and see me on my licensing table. Okay, he'll be first in the queue. So I'm those of you who are licensing experts, and there are several of you in the room, I'm taking kind of the approach if you don't love licensing quite as much as somebody who works for an LSP. So this is accurate. There are a couple of other options. So what we're saying here is, but always the best way of paying for base compute reserved instance. Always the best way of paying for the software is with bringing your own licenses on there through the Azure Hybrid Benefit. And we've seen that you can have your own licenses with software assurance, you get the Azure Hybrid Benefit. We saw that for the Windows Server part, there were server subscriptions. What do you think there might be for SQL Server? A server subscription? There is. What do you think the terms for a SQL Server subscription are? Right, I'm going to come back to that. That was the advanced answer. Very good. So do you think you pay up front, or do you think you pay monthly in arrears? Up front. How long do you think you pay for?
3 years.
1 or 3 years. It's exactly the same. It becomes, trivial. So what we find is that if you've got customers who have got licenses with SA, business as usual. A lot of customers don't, so we can now sell them a SQL Server subscription as well. So let's just get some detail on those. So only core licenses available, sold in 2 packs, and the slightly different rule here, I've got to assign a minimum of 4 licenses to an Azure virtual machine. Further, 2 packs can be assigned, and the way they're transacted is exactly the same as Windows Server subscriptions. So exactly the same. Okay. Pausing. I'm aware I've got, before lunch, 7 minutes, so I'm just picking out the perfect 7 minutes for you. Let's go back to this slide, where we need to understand left and right hand side, and the fact that everything we've talked about, I think probably if it's the first time you've seen it, you might feel you've got a bit of a tremulous hand on all the licensing. But over there, we saw that there's base compute, there's Windows Server, and there's SQL Server, reserved instance, Azure Hybrid Benefit, server subscriptions are the answer here. However, what's newer is the fact that you can, by committing, get cost savings on this side as well. So what we need to imagine is that when we are consuming the Azure SQL database service, most people have always just consumed that as a single fee. I want to have database as a service. Here's what it will cost you. There's extra costs like storage and transactions, but there's the fee for the service. That fee, though, is actually made up again of 2 components. One is the infrastructure. I've got to pay for the Azure stuff, and the other bit is SQL Server. So if you had to hazard a wild guess, go mad, what would you say to a customer who wants to use the Azure SQL database service? We'd say to them, right, for the best price for the infrastructure bit, you would buy a what? Until everybody gets this, there's no lunch. So you might want to concentrate really hard. Even Steve, the video man's going, I know the answer. So we need to think in our heads. So, okay, so for the infrastructure, for the computey part of it, it's a reservation. Ah, okay, reservation for the compute part. And then what are you going to recommend for the SQL Server part? Lunch is normally quite good here, so maybe try slightly harder. Can you tell what my first job was? I know some of you know this. So my first job was a teacher, which maybe you can see, but I asked the group this the other day. I said, oh, hang on. Do you know what my first job was? And from the back of the room, one of my colleagues goes, a prison warden? So apologies if I'm too strict. So just recapping, okay? SQL database service, 2 components, infrastructure and SQL Server. The customer has to pay for both of those. They can buy an all-inclusive thing, make it easy, expensive and flexible. So a reservation comes in to pay for the infrastructure, and you bring your own SQL licenses for the SQL Server part. And what we end up with is a very similar diagram to what we had before. So these are the Azure SQL database options, an all-inclusive service. So remember, I've got to pay for infrastructure and SQL Server, or I could pay for infrastructure on a meter and bring my own licenses, or what we're really recommending here, buy this thing, new word, and bring my own licenses for the SQL Server part. So when you buy the infrastructure for the Azure SQL database service, it's a reservation, right? When I buy the compute part of a virtual machine, it's a reservation, but we call those reserved instances because that's the particular member of the family. Can you see here, the particular member of the family that I'm buying here is reserved capacity. Now, if you call this a SQL database reservation, fine. Doesn't matter. So be aware, reservation, general category of thing, pay up front 1 or 3 years. Why would I do that? To get the best possible price. And then there are different flavors of reservation. I really wish I bought prizes, actually. How many different flavors of reservation are there today? Now, you might be tempted to say, 477, there's bound to be dozens. There's not. There's less than 10. Anyone know? A lot less than 10. A lot less, not a lot less, a bit less than half of 10. Okay, I don't think I could be much more specific, if I'm honest.
5.
A bit less than half of 10. 4. 4, he's a genius. Excellent. So, just to finish with, let's do an update on reservations. This is a bit of a drum roll. We have some new family members. Up until just a couple of weeks ago, we had reservations, the family, 2 members, reserved instance, base compute virtual machines, reserved capacity, infrastructure and SQL database as a service. Now, we have 2 more members of the family. And I won't do this in too much detail, I just want you to know what they are. I've done this from the perspective of a CSP partner going into my customer account. So can you see at the top, I'm being Alex at Northwind Traders and Wingtip Toys is my customer. I have these are all the things I could add. Reservations is a family. When I click on reservations, there are the 4 members of the family. So we know about the top one, virtual machine reserved instances. We know about the 3rd one, the SQL database reserved capacity, and the new members of the family, Cosmos DB, and paid Linux, so the SUSE distribution of Linux. And if I just split those out, I see that actually 2 of them are infrastructure as a service things, and 2 of them are platform as a service things. And if I build this up, do the talk track in your head, because I think you'll be able to do this. Windows Server Virtual Machine. Best price for Windows Server, yeah? SUSE virtual machine. Ooh, new type of reservation, a software reservation. What do you think the payment terms are for that? Up front, 1 or 3 years. Why do I do that? I want the best possible price. Hurrah, it's all very consistent. It's still, still got to have base compute, so I still use our good old first friend, the reserved instance there, and that's the best price we're paying for a SUSE virtual machine. Over on the other side, we've just seen the SQL database, reserved capacity, bring your own license. Cosmos is, of course, a little bit different. You measure this in provision throughput. So you estimate how many times you think you're going to talk to your database, and you pay for that up front. And this, again, is just called reserved capacity. But all of those are about committed offers. All of those are about saying to the customer, you're prepared to commit, in this case, pay me up front for 1 or 3 years, and that's how I'm going to give you the best price. I'm not going to discount the all-inclusive SKUs. The way the commitment works here is that you buy these capacity through reservations on there. Now, you may not be superheroes at the end of it, but I hope if you knew nothing, you feel that you've started your journey. If you knew a bit, hopefully there have been some new things in there. You will get these slides. Listen to the recording again. I would say if it's your first time listening to this, then you're probably thinking, gosh, I don't want to shake my head too much or the knowledge might fall out. As long as you have an understanding of the key points, then that's all I can hope for today. But if you have questions, see me at the topic tables.